Here at MSNBC, we work very closely with, we work physically alongside our NBC News colleagues. But that does not always mean that we have any inside information about what exactly they're doing on the network side and what they're working on. And vice versa. You know, whatever we're working on or whatever we're developing, they may not have, total transparency. As such, when NBC News broadcasts its special report tomorrow morning on the impeachment proceedings against President Trump, the first public impeachment hearings in the impeachment proceedings against President Donald J. Trump. And when that NBC News special report tomorrow morning is anchored by Lester Holt from Nightly News and NBC's chief legal correspondent, Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, and Chuck Todd from Meet the Press. I mean, yes, we all work in the same building together, right? Yes, we are all part of the same big happy family. But I can't tell you exactly what that NBC News special coverage is going to look like. That said, I can pretty much guarantee you that it will not have a theme song as cool or as oddly ponderous and artistic as the way NBC News played its special theme song and lead-in to the impeachment proceedings in 1973 for then-President Richard Nixon. Because that was all covered with NBC News special reports, too. But have you seen this? This was... they developed a whole theme song. This was like the opening credits to the Watergate hearings.
NBC News special report. Watergate, Senate hearings. Here from Washington is NBC News correspondent Garrick Utley.
Good morning. This is the Senate caucus room in Washington, D.C., and it's jammed this morning, jammed with spectators, newsmen, senators, and their aides. And the scene adds to the sense of drama as the Senate opens what is likely to become the most serious investigation it has ever made. An investigation of the American political system and the presidency itself. The name of the investigation is Watergate because that is the name of the building where the Democratic Party offices were located, offices that were broken into and bugged last June. But the investigation that begins today will go far beyond that incident. The senators will also be asking questions about other acts of political sabotage in last year's presidential campaign. And they will be asking about the money, secret cash that financed these acts of sabotage, where it came from, and how it was used. That is the Senate committee, 7 members, headed by Senator Sam Ervin of North Carolina.
So that's NBC News correspondent Garrick Utley off camera, but doing live color, live play-by-play of the NBC News special report on the first day of the Watergate hearings, May 17th, 1973, having to kind of vamp there a little bit as everybody's getting seated. No more pictures, no more pictures. Okay, they're convening the hearing. And tomorrow morning, every network will do their own version of this special report, right? I mean, as I just mentioned, NBC News is going to have their whole senior crew doing their special report. Again, 46 and a half years on from the way it looked in Watergate. Here at MSNBC, you should know Brian Williams and Nicolle Wallace. They're going to be co-anchoring MSNBC's special coverage starting at 9 a.m. All of the networks are going to be doing something like this. But as you can see from this vintage testimony from 73, the fact that we have done this so few times in American history means that it's hard to see any of this is normal, right? It's hard to extrapolate from what we've already been through to know exactly what it ought to be like when these hearings kick off tomorrow. There's nothing you can look at from 73 or from any of the other impeachments that can tell you how it's likely to go this time. For example, I can tell you that I don't think they're going to run that theme music and that opening again. I will say it's cool enough that I kind of want to take it for this show, right? What we need on this show is more timpani. I've always thought so. Watergate. Anyway, but as we head into the start of the public impeachment hearings against President Trump tomorrow, I do think that there is an almost forgotten element of how this was handled in Watergate that is maybe a little bit instructive for what we're about to see tomorrow. And that is, for all the drama, for all the gravitas and momentum of that moment, right, that sort of nationwide show-stopping suspense as to what would happen at those Watergate hearings and how they would go, what we'd all learn, for all the huge buildup to that first day, that first public hearing in Watergate. Do you want to know who they called as their first witness that first day? When the eyes of every single sentient human in America were on those TV broadcasts, their first witness they called for the big opening day was the office manager, whose name you will not recognize today. But even at the time, nobody recognized his name then either.
Counsel will call the first witness.
Will Mr. Robert Odle please come to the witness table?
Mr. Robert Odle. You can see they didn't choreograph this for maximum drama. This is the first witness. They didn't have the first witness sitting anywhere near the witness table or the front of the room. Just kind of make his way through the whole crowd. Obviously, he's also wearing his father's suit. And so there's this choice that they make to bring up this very, very young man to be the first witness in the Watergate hearings. Nobody has ever heard of him. They were not trying to wow the country coming out of the gate with some big, explosive witness or some big, very well-known witness right at the top of the hearings. I mean, they knew everybody in the country was watching. The anticipation could not have been more dramatic. And they bring on this 29-year-old kid who had been the office manager for the Nixon re-election campaign. And what they had him do for most of his testimony is they literally had him take out a pointer. You see him holding the microphone there and using a pointer. And he walks everybody through the organizational chart of how the Nixon re-election campaign was organized. Who was running it? Who was in charge of security? Who was deputy to who? Where did everybody sit? The morning after that first hearing, the front page of the New York Times had Robert Odle Jr. There he is, age 29, on the front page of the New York Times, pointing at the org chart for the Nixon re-election campaign. It might not have been the blockbuster beginning that the country had been hoping for. But looking back at that now, and especially knowing how things unfolded over Watergate, it kind of looks like that might have been a good way for them to start on day one. It just made sense in terms of setting the stage for what the whole country was going to learn. As those hearings would ultimately stretch on and on through the late spring and into the summer, those hearings would ultimately lay the groundwork for the president's resignation the following year. But they brought on the office manager from the campaign at the very start of the Watergate hearings. And the effect of that was to bring on somebody and introduce somebody to the country who was totally normal and who was not involved in any of the criminal behavior at the heart of this scandal. Somebody who wasn't even necessarily a witness to the core and most serious wrongdoing that Congress was investigating in Watergate. I mean, by starting with him, by starting with this guy, Bob Odle, the Watergate Committee essentially calibrated our moral vision for what we were about to learn. Right? They started us off with a normal, law-abiding person who hadn't done anything wrong, somebody who was behaving in a normal, rational, law-abiding manner. In so doing, through his eyes, we could see how abnormal the president's behavior was and how abnormal was the behavior of the president's henchmen, how wrong and weird and inappropriate it all was when these crimes started to happen and when the criminal conspiracy kicked in to try to cover up those crimes. I mean, as much as President Nixon at the time and his defenders might have wanted to characterize Nixon's actions as, normal politics, everybody does it, nothing to see here. Through the eyes of a normal person just trying to do his job, caught up in the middle of this, you could actually see through him, that first witness, that actually this wasn't normal at all. This was totally weird and wrong.
One of the things that happened, and I very honestly don't know if it happened before or after the phone call, was I saw Mr. Liddy as I testified at the trial.
Did he call you or did you call him?
No, sir. Nobody called anybody. I saw him in the hall.
I see.
And he asked me where the paper shredder was.
What?
The paper shredder.
All right.
The paper shredder, which is the very famous big paper shredder.
Was there a big paper shredder
Yes,
and a
sir.
little baby
sir.
paper shredder too?
Pardon?
Was there more than one?
Yes, sir.
All right, and he asked where the big paper shredder is.
Right. There was a
Did
big
you ask him why he wanted to know?
No, sir, I didn't. I said it's in there.
Did he have anything with him?
Not at that time. He later came out and said, "How do you work it?" And I said, "You press the button." And then later on, I saw him with a pile of papers, perhaps a foot high.
And what was he doing with it?
He was on his way into the shredding room.
Did you see him shredding the paper?
No, but I assumed that he was going to shred them.
Do you shred papers of that sort in that quantity regularly?
No, sir, I don't.
Does anyone?
Well,
is it normal to be shredding a foot-tall pile of paper at the president's re-election campaign headquarters just after we learned that there has been a mysterious break-in into one of our opponent's offices? Well, I mean, for me, it was not normal for me, sir, normal? That was the first witness in the televised public Watergate hearings, which ultimately led to President Richard Nixon's resignation. The office manager in the re-election campaign, right, who's earnest, just trying to do his job, not caught up in any of Nixon's crimes until he saw some of the residue of those crimes and that criminal behavior around him in this office that he was managing. And he was able to describe on that first day of hearings this sort of creeping revelation that something was wrong. He was able to describe that through the eyes of somebody who really hadn't expected anything to be wrong and who himself was not in on any of the crimes. Do you see how that's sort of like a moral calibration, right? Rather than starting with a villain, rather than starting with somebody who's got an axe to grind, starting with somebody who just happens to be there. Whoa, what's going on here? Tomorrow, the impeachment hearings against President Trump. Only the fourth impeachment proceedings against a sitting president in the history of the United States. Tomorrow, those public impeachment hearings against President Trump will not start with the Trump campaign's office manager. But they are going to start with two witnesses. The current top diplomat for the U.S. government in Ukraine. You may remember that he was sent to Ukraine on short notice after America's previous ambassador to that country got recalled from her post, which was apparently part of the scheme for which President Trump is now being impeached. They needed her out of there so she wouldn't stand in their way for what they were trying to get the Ukraine government to do. We're going to hear from that recalled ambassador on Friday of this week. But tomorrow we'll hear from the veteran diplomat who was called in on short notice to take her place after she was fired, and his name is Ambassador Bill Taylor. We'll also hear tomorrow from the top career official at the State Department who has responsibility for Ukraine, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State George Kent. And as far as we understand it, these two witnesses are going to be seated at the same time, so presumably next to each other at the witness stand at this hearing. It'll be held in the large committee hearing room at the Longworth House office building, which is a really ornate, really large room. It sometimes can be mistaken for the House chamber. It's a big room. You can fit a lot of people in, and it's very fancy. The proceedings will start tomorrow morning. Doors will open at 9:45 for people to take their seats and for the press to get into their positions. Then at 10 a.m. Eastern time, the hearings will be gavelled into order. There will be opening statements from California Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, who chairs the Intelligence Committee. Then after him, there'll be an opening statement from Devin Nunes, who's the top Republican on that committee. After their opening statements, both of the witnesses, Bill Taylor and George Kent, will be sworn in. There will be a time for them to give opening remarks as well, although we don't know if either of them will do so. And then the questioning will start. Technically, the first 45 minutes of questioning on each side belongs to the top Democrat and the top Republican on the committee. Again, Adam Schiff and Devin Nunes. But at least Schiff, if not both of them, are expected to give up most of that time, to cede most of that opening 45 minutes for each side to lawyers who have been hired by the committee, in part with an eye toward this process. So Adam Schiff and Devin Nunes can take back any of that time they want. They can do any of that questioning themselves. But we're expecting, in all likelihood, it'll be, to start, after those opening statements, 45 minutes by the lawyer on the Democratic side and then 45 minutes by the lawyer on the Republican side. For those of us who are going to be watching this at home, trying to follow along, that's probably a blessing, right? It at least means there'll be continuity at the start. There'll be continuity of purpose in questioning that is not continuously interrupted by needing to flip to a new questioner every few minutes, right? So that's how it'll start. Two 45-minute chunks from the Democrats and the Republicans. And then after that, we'll get into that familiar disorienting rhythm where each member on the committee, all the remaining 20 members of the committee, 13 Democrats and 9 Republicans, including the chair and ranking member on each side, all the remaining members will each get 5 minutes to do their questioning. Thereafter, it'll ping pong back and forth between the Democratic and Republican members. And so, we shall see how all of that goes. I can't wait. I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight. In part, just because this is a historic thing. There aren't very many Americans since the origins of our country who have lived through an impeachment. It just hasn't happened very many times in our history as a country. To be here for it, let alone to have the privilege of helping cover it as a news story, it's just a humbling and exciting thing. We also learned late tonight, just before getting on the air tonight, a little bit more about the overall schedule for these hearings after tomorrow. This first one tomorrow, George Kent and William Taylor are the witnesses. We've known for several days now that the second hearing will be Friday of this week with that ambassador who was recalled from Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. But just tonight, Chairman Schiff announced the next several days of impeachment hearings, which will be next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But they're divided into morning and afternoon sessions. Tuesday in the morning, the public hearing will include testimony from Jennifer Williams. She's the only official from the vice president's office who's been called to testify thus far. She'll testify Tuesday morning alongside Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He's the active duty military officer who serves as the top Ukraine official on the National Security Council at the White House. He's the lieutenant colonel in the Army who has been vilified and attacked by Republican members of Congress and particularly by the conservative media. He's going to testify in public in these impeachment proceedings a week from today in that morning session with Jennifer Williams. Then on Tuesday afternoon next week, there will be a second session with 2 more witnesses. Kurt Volker recently resigned as the U.S. government's special envoy to Ukraine. He resigned that job right after he was first summoned to testify to the impeachment. He's going to testify publicly Tuesday afternoon alongside Tim Morrison, who's an acolyte of John Bolton, recently fired as National Security Advisor. Morrison is another senior National Security Council official who has responsibility for Russia. Then Wednesday morning next week, Ambassador Gordon Sondland will testify. There had been questions as to whether or not he'd be summoned for a public hearing, given the reported problems with some of his closed-door testimony. A number of other witnesses contradicted things he said in his testimony. That led, among other things, to Sondland submitting a revision to his testimony, where he said he suddenly recalled things that he previously hadn't recalled when he had been asked about them under oath. But he'll be Wednesday morning on his own. Then Wednesday afternoon, it'll be Defense Department official Laura Cooper who will testify, as well as David Hale, who I believe is the number 3 official in the U.S. State Department. Then Thursday of next week, yet another public impeachment hearing. And again, as far as we know, this one will feature a solo witness, Dr. Fiona Hill, whose deposition transcript honestly read like a spy thriller. She, before Tim Morrison, was the top Russia official on the National Security Council. She's also just a veteran national security official in Washington who served multiple presidents. So all told, in terms of what we understand of this schedule, that means we're looking at 7 different public impeachment hearings that are now scheduled just between tomorrow and the end of next week. And again, some of them will be broken down into 2 sessions per day.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.